I find it interesting that here we are almost exactly at the midpoint of Lent. We're at the end of the third week, and we have 3 more weeks to go before we can celebrate the joys of the resurrection. And we almost have somewhat of a response to our very first reading from Ash Wednesday, from the prophet Joel, that started off, "Return to the Lord." It was an imperative, a command. And yet, in today, in Hosea, we have, "Come, let us return to the Lord." So it took 3 weeks to respond to that imperative. Or have we been returning for 3 weeks, day after day? I think that's a question that we might be left with. Have we been returning? Have we been making effort or trying at least to accept God's grace of conversion and reconciliation in our lives daily? Have we forgotten about it? Is this a reminder? What is this invitation for us this day? Have we even begun our Lenten journey? Sometimes that can even be the case, where we might be going through all of the motions, but really not even make the attempt to try to go inward and see that God that is asking for our return. But to help, we have today's gospel, where Jesus presents to us 2 figures. And really, in some ways, it's almost somewhat comical, especially in the words of the Pharisee, where he says, "I thank you, God, that I'm not like all of those other people," especially like that tax collector over there. You wonder if that original audience would have chuckled to themselves if it weren't for the fact that Jesus made them the Pharisees. He actually made that group the one that was saying that. It's almost as if Jesus were to come here today in this space and say to us, 2 people went into the chapel to pray. One was an Augustinian, the other was a Carmelite. And the Carmelite said, "I am so grateful that I'm not like that crazy Augustinian." And the Augustinian with true humility would come in and say, "Thank you, God, for creating me," and blah, blah, blah. Or it could be really the other way around. I think that's what, not really though, right? That's really what this gospel is really about, is placing us into this scene. That we could be either person. The reality is, we're both. Sometimes every other day, sometimes every other hour. Depending sometimes on our situation, depending on sometimes the people that we surround ourselves with. Who are we at this midpoint in life? Can we acknowledge that sometimes we've been like this Pharisee or this Carmelite, and other times we've been like this tax collector? Who are we? Who do we want to be? And how can we move from one to the other and really try to attempt to stay in the position of the tax collector, in that position of humility, of real self-awareness? That's a hard place to be. That's a hard place to be. In some ways, it might seem that it was easy for the tax collector to say this, but probably not. We all know that it's hard to embrace humility. It's hard to really do that journey of self-awareness, of self-knowledge, of seeing God's true unconditional love for each one of us. And yet that is what Jesus is asking for us this day at this midpoint, as once again we make our return.